Hey guys, Tyler here. More recently, I spotted a video that is called 7 Questions That Liberals Cannot Answer. And so, without further hesitation, let's respond to the questions.
What is socialism?
Socialism is the idea that the means of production is owned either by the collective or directly by the state. In other words, it calls for the elimination of private property. Now, the fundamental core of classical liberalism is actually the advocacy of private property. Let's take, for example, the fact that I'm using this video camera right now. The fact that I'm using this video camera shows that basically people are owner of property through legal transactions. It does not just apply to cameras. It could also apply to books. It could also apply to other kind of things like houses or apartments or any kind of utilities that we use on a day-to-day basis. If somebody makes a transaction, then that person is automatically the owner of said property. And so liberalism, at its most classical sense, advocates for the ideas of property rights. And so because socialism goes completely contrary to the ideas of classical liberalism, I don't see how exactly the two are actually compatible.
The second is, what is marriage?
Marriage, more or less, is a legal binding contract for couples to further their relationship with each other. And the main reason why we have stuff like marriage in the first place, from a purely scientific point of view, is largely because we know directly that humans are hardwired for things like ceremonies. And so that would mean that because we are hardwired to, participate in ceremonies, that will mean that things like marriages or parties and whatnot are bound to actually occur. And so that will mean that because people are actually ceremonious, they want to continue their relationships, and that's why stuff like marriages actually exist. I guess the question then becomes, are marriages have some sort of benefits or disadvantages? The answer is yes, because there could be some cases where the couple are not necessarily compatible with each other. That is one thing. The other idea would be the issue of abuse. Are couples able to abuse each other and still, of course, get married? And why exactly are they still staying together? Which is why we allow stuff like divorce, because we know that not all situations are going to be actually okay for the issue about a person getting married. Now, marriage can involve a man and a woman. It can involve a woman and a woman. And it can also involve basically a man and a man. If the argumentation is that the whole purpose of marriage is to have kids, why exactly are there people who are married who don't necessarily have kids? These are people, after years upon years of trying to conceive, they simply cannot have any type of kids whatsoever. Or for some cases, there are couples that can in fact have kids, however, they decide not to have kids. So I don't think marriage's purpose is solely to have kids. It's to further relationships with the partner that you actually love.
What is a woman? Or what is a man?
If we're talking about biological evidence, we do in fact know that men have XY chromosomes and that women have XX chromosomes. Now, there are some cases where men have XXY chromosomes, or some cases where women have triple X chromosomes. And I'm not talking about porn either. So, because of those chromosomal differences, because of height differences, because of muscle mass, because the fact that men have penises and women have vaginas, it shows that there are clear biological differences between a man and a woman. But I guess the question then becomes, what exactly constitutes as manly? What actually constitutes directly as being more of a woman. Let's take, for example, something as simple as the color pink. Once upon a time, men thought that pink was actually a color for them. However, over a gradual period of time, it seems as though that society has determined that we associate pink directly for the case of girls and women. So, it seems as though what is considered to be manly, what could be considered to be girly, it all depends largely on the time period that you actually live in. Are you less manly because you have less muscle mass? Are you less manly because there's no chest hair or no beard on your face? Are you less manly because you have a feminine voice? That kind of question is really, really difficult because basically you need to determine like what's the objective standard of being manly. Or is it simply the case that we should actually judge people based upon their character and not what's too manly or too feminine and just judge them for who they are?
What is sex for?
When it comes down to the issue of sex, I define sex as intercourse between people. So it could be like a man, a woman, or a man and a woman. Or in some cases, it can also be the case of group sex where more than one man and more than one woman have an orgy together. Now, there are many reasons why exactly people have sex. One such reason will be the issue of procreation. That is to say, that the main reason why people have sex is largely because they want to have kids. That's like one reason right there. The second reason why people want to have sex is out of personal enjoyment. They like to have sex because they like to have it. That's like the only reason. The third reason why people want to have sex is because they want to have a closer bond with their own partner. Now, with the case of hookup culture, of course, the argument can actually be had, well, if people are actually casually having sex, isn't it actually bad? Could people actually spread more diseases because of hookup culture? To which I would say yes, that is actually true. It is preferable to, of course, have sex in a relationship in comparison to just having sex with whoever you want to. That being said, although I prefer sex in a relationship, it does not give me the absolute right to tell people that you have to have the same sort of standards like I do. So although it's preferable for people to have relationships and have sex, I'm not going to tell people to not do that either and do other things.
The next question that I find that liberals have a hard time answering would be this. What is a person?
When we ask the question, what exactly is a person, we're referring to individual humans. And I guess the question then becomes, what exactly constitutes, the issue of consciousness? How do people actually become conscious or have self-awareness of themselves? And I would say, judging from, life experiences, I would say that many people start to get the idea about the sense of who exactly they are by the time that they're like a little child. And I guess maybe that's how people develop this sort of sense of personhood. But I guess when it comes down to the issue of consciousness, I guess some people argue that I guess for that issue of consciousness, it starts directly in the womb. And I guess it comes again about the issue about responsibility. Of course, it's not necessarily preferable for somebody who is innocent to, have their pregnancy terminated. That is pretty much true, especially when the fact that, the vast majority of abortions may, in fact, not be for the case of healthcare reasons. I think it's like 1% of abortions actually occur that way because the vast majority is out of convenience and that the 1% is actually for cases of things like rape or incest or for things like ectopic pregnancies. That being said, Although I understand that the vast majority is not, of course, for healthcare reasons, I would also understand the fact that there are also many health problems on the issue of pregnancy. And I don't think that a woman should be forced against the state to carry a pregnancy against their term, which is exactly why I voted in favor of abortion in the state of Maryland. Because I understand there's like a lot of nuance on this particular issue about what exactly is personhood and how exactly people have to deal with situations like these. And so I would say that personhood, that the idea of consciousness is actually starts probably directly from the womb. And I guess with the issue about like, what is personhood, it starts when a person is actually a child, when they start to have self-discovery about who exactly they are.
And here's the last question. When I'm engaging people on subjects, especially liberal audiences, and they tell me, well, Jesus would never say that. Jesus doesn't care about homosexuality. Jesus doesn't care about abortion. Jesus would support this tax policy. Jesus would do this. Jesus would do that. I ask them, who is Jesus? And in particular, is Jesus God? Like, if someone's going to argue with me from a Christian liberal perspective, I want to know, are we talking from the same page here?
Jesus Christ is a Jewish carpenter. What happened that in the past was that a bunch of fanatics say that he was actually born directly from a virgin, that he can walk on water, that he can turn water into wine, that he can perform exorcisms, that he can also raise the dead, and that he himself actually rose directly from the dead. And so I would say that what happened, that like with most stories, there might be some sort of truth behind the story. Yes, it's entirely possible that a historical Jesus actually did in fact exist and did like wonderful things throughout his life. However, just because I could accept the premise of a historical Jesus doesn't necessarily mean now this Jesus guy can do all these miracles. It's entirely possible to actually say, you know what, these stories as told in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they're good, wise tales to actually, have some sort of philosophical understanding about life, and that's also good too. But at the same time, we need to recognize that the stories are just that. They're just stories. To take it literally, that it can literally walk on water, that it can literally rise directly from the dead, that it can literally feed a whole entire village of 500 people with loaves of bread and also fishes, I think is going a step too far. We can take these stories as moral lessons and not reflective of metaphysical reality itself. Look, there's probably of course, a lot of stories throughout history that might be based upon real people. Let's take, for example, the issue of Robin Hood. It could be multiple people that inspired the Robin Hood story. There could have been multiple people that inspired Paul Bunyan. We know that Santa Claus was influenced directly by St. Nicholas. And so, just because a story might be, of course, based upon a real person does not mean that I now accept the idea of Santa Claus. So, because I don't actually accept the premise that a guy can actually go from rooftop to rooftop with reindeer, eating cookies and milk, does not mean that I don't acknowledge that St. Nicholas is a real person. Similarly, I can acknowledge that, sure, a guy named Jesus actually existed, but it does not mean I have to buy into the other kind of metaphysical claims too. Anyway, what do you guys think about my answer? Tell me in the comment section down below. And as always, I'll see you guys next video.